So today is day 17, I think. Not 100% sure. The days are getting harder and harder to track. But huge sigh of relief. The numbers are going down. So over the weekend the numbers were still going up, which is a huge psychological blow. I think everyone thought we're doing the right thing, and why are the numbers going up? I know there's a lot of data modelers out there and public health people who said this is what we expect, this is what we know, this is what should happen, this is Delta, rules are different. I know psychologically though, when those numbers go up, you're just thinking, because talking with mates on a Zoom poker thing, some of them were overseas. New Zealand has pretty hard line level 4 restrictions. I think we feel we adhere to these restrictions as well. So when the cases go up next, so there was talk on the weekend that we may be having on the weekend even more hard line level 4 restrictions. Now I think a lot of people are curious, particularly people who have been talking with people overseas. If we're not currently in hard line level 4, what does that look like? And we don't really know the details, but they did suggest some of that essential worker situations was going to be really tightened up. But I think in terms of messaging, it's very important not to confuse us, particularly where you see the definition of essential worker can be quite variable in some other places. And even here, I don't think if we really thought about it, we're not that 100% sure. For example, if your car scrapes a tree or bangs itself, is your panel beater essential? Now, I don't know. Surely if you can't drive, that's essential. But then for the panel beater, is getting the part essential? So then is the courier essential? So then is the person who does that? And so you could just keep going wider and wider and wider. And for an outside person, when we looked at the restrictions that Australia's had, they've had those slippery slope situations where you just can justify all sorts of things by being essential. Because, I mean, we do live in a very connected society, so I don't know where you draw the line sometimes. Certainly someone did ask the PM and she said, well, I mentioned if you had a huge plumbing disaster. But just, I can see lots of half renovations at the moment. There must be something in between a renovation and an emergency fix, and how extensive do you have to do the fix, and if there's insurance and blah, yeah. So it can go on and on. Because I know there are many exemptions, particularly we're all focused on New South Wales, who are still, they're not going exponential, but it seems to be at least 200 a day. And I get the impression their Premier, who's the person who leads their response, has not given up, but they haven't enforced or mandated rules as strictly. They just want people to be sensible. Now, I think that's a good idea, but people to be sensible, I think that's tough, especially if you're going to go through a marathon lockdown, which it looks like they're headed for. I don't know if you can rely on people's sensibilities, particularly if their income starts dwindling. They start getting a bit tribal, and I think you're going to put pressure on people to probably make them do, I won't say the worst things, but maybe not the most ideal things for each other. So as we in here, I get such amazing detail on every case, and sometimes we drip feed a little bit, but most of the time we get quite a lot of how the media have just been plastering all the details on the news in print, which, I mean, it's overall good, transparency and all, but I know a lot of people now, they really don't want to get COVID, who've been vaccinated, because they don't want to be known as a cluster. Now, what I mean is, most people know that we know all our clusters are then given a label so we can understand them. So at the moment, I think we've got the Birkdale social cluster, which sounds like a pretty neat group. something I'd be keen to join, maybe in my 60s or something. And we've got a few other clusters which have names. Now, nobody wants to be known as the charge nurse manager cluster, the Auckland Indian doctor cluster, etc. And you have no control over that, really. The ministry does start labelling cases as A, B, C, D, but I think the media's role in naming the cluster is probably what everyone's thinking is, oh my gosh. I think a lot of people probably think that's worse than actually getting COVID, is having all your, maybe not your details, but just being known as a cluster. So yeah, people I think are quite worried about that. But I mean, in a perverse way, it does make sure people do their best to not get COVID, which is really important and good. So other brands that have been taking the hit with a very transparent sort of response is the All Blacks. I'll try and put a thingy here. The All Blacks partying it up at a location of interest. And that, I mean, that's a huge attention line grabber. Sounds bad for the All Blacks, sounds bad, it kind of makes you think, oh my god, super spreader. And the All Blacks, to be fair, a lot of people are not coming in and out of New Zealand, including Israel Adesanya, but the All Blacks seem to have the seas parted for them at every step. They had private isolation before, and they pretty much got on a plane pretty easily leaving Auckland during level 4 lockdown to go to Perth. Deals are on, deals are off, but it always seems to work out for them. And I know there's growing feeling that All Blacks don't probably represent what a lot of people in New Zealand are interested in now. I certainly am a lifelong card-carrying member of the All Black Desperado fan group. But I think every year there's less and less kids playing rugby. You can see the stadiums are half full. Eden Park was looking empty for an All Blacks test. A few factors there, but I think it's a sign of a shift from rugby. And so the All Blacks are then implicated in this partying up. But of course the devil is always when you read the article. And they were at a location of interest prior to lockdown, partying it up. And I mean, they won the Bledisloe Cup. It was actually a record score. I should put a thing here. It wasn't actually their greatest game by any stretch, I would say. But they had that ability to do that. And from a team point of view, they were probably, it's very much allowable, but probably even encouraged to have a big blowout after a huge win. So you can't knock them for that. But yeah, it doesn't sound good. And the next one to take the brand hit is the food subscription, one of the food subscription businesses. And there are many, and they're probably very similar, but HelloFresh has been outed as one of these places where essential workers have transmitted coronavirus to each other. And so you can imagine HelloFresh, if you're going to pick each one, because they're very similar to me. They're both this, all of them seem the same price, they offer the same thing, they have the same way to pay. So these food subscription businesses are probably very much just a brand. It's the main thing you use to figure out which one you're going to pay your money to. And HelloFresh has been outed, so I mean, I'm sure if you're the marketer or PR person, you just must be thinking, oh gosh. Hopefully the New Zealand market's not really that big and they don't really mind, but it is important to know that I think there is more scrutiny with the Delta, that workplace transmission is a problem, and essential workers seem to be passing on a little bit more than previous versions. I can't actually remember the Alpha, the Beta variant, but we're at Delta now. So Alpha, Beta, Delta, Omega, I don't know when that comes in. So now that everybody's sighing a bit of relief, that the numbers are going down, only going down 2 days in a row though, so I think technically not a trend statistically or a quality improvement trend. You need 3 in a row, but it's like when we win an America's Cup race. I think there's just a collective feel-good feeling like we got this, we absolutely got this. But almost right on cue, as we seem to be approaching a corner, starting to turn a corner, it's time to get tribal. And at this stage it seems that who should get the vaccine is now our main point of contention. And should Aucklanders be prioritised? Now, on one argument, on one side, you've got the people who say, yep, look, Auckland's the one who gets the lockdowns. We're going to pass it on to the rest of New Zealand. Vaccinate us, and you'll probably have a good go at protecting everyone, let alone the Aucklanders. And there's the other argument on the other side is bloody Aucklanders. And both have valid backing, I think. And, I think they should just try and make vaccines as easily available to everyone as they can. And certainly if there's a capacity issue of not getting enough Aucklanders vaccines, they should just give enough vaccines for Aucklanders and the rest of the country. I think if you do that prioritisation of one group, I think you have to be very careful, because it can lead to unintended consequences, particularly if people are going to start continuing to put up their own roadblocks and defining themselves by where they live. I think that's probably not a step we want to take. I think in New Zealand as well, we rely so much on cars. People are moving all the time. So would that just create a sort of market of people coming up to Auckland using an Auckland address just to get their vaccine? That's probably not what you want to happen. I think our government has probably learnt another lesson, I hope, that we have a mainly unvaccinated population, and we just need to stick the course and get everyone vaccinated. We still don't have a plan once everyone's vaccinated. So I think MIQ will remain, but vaccination will just be one part of it. I don't think it'll fix a lot of the problem. The problem is still MIQ. It is still people coming in. It's the virus is tricky, which is always the fallback explanation, but that really needs to be tightened up maximally as one of the main things to stop COVID. As we've seen elsewhere in the world, cases are just going through the roof in places that have done we're all vaccinated now, let's just have a travel passport and allow mixing. Yeah, it's not really working out like that, and there are less people dying of COVID, that is 100% sure, with the vaccination take-up, but the just sheer numbers of hospitalisation means there's a whole lot of other health activity which is being pushed aside. Now, the impact of that when COVID was rampaging through people and killing people in the first wave, second wave, third wave, was still estimated to be far higher for the non-COVID related deaths, but happening because of COVID swamping the system. So, yeah, they're talked about building a purpose-built MIQ. I think that has got to be the way to go. Planting an MIQ in the CBD with public nearby and potential for leaking out. I think everyone would support a purpose-built MIQ somewhere in the middle of nowhere, potentially, and a purpose-built hospital probably for COVID would be the way to go, I would say, because I don't think the vaccination is going to alleviate that need. And speaking of which, apparently the one group which you think would be pretty good at locking down is prisoners. And so there's been a prison cluster, or there's a prison potential case where I think a guard has got it, and now they're tracing and testing a lot of prisoners. But apparently the prisoner vaccination rate for one dose is pretty good, so that's good. But you'd hope they could lock down everyone who is in prison and know exactly where and when the contact is in. If they don't, probably the prison's got a bigger problem about how they actually exist. So yeah, we'll see what happens with the Aucklanders and Pfizer vaccine. I think we probably don't know, is that actually going to help more people get vaccinated quicker? We don't know. I think if you're going to prioritise a group, the vaccine supply issue should just be taken out of it. That should be not a thing people are worried about where they're clamouring for vaccines. We have to control things in other ways, I would suggest, rather than going down that slippery slope. Okay, anyway, so what else? So, speaking of things which seem to be a uniquely Auckland problem, so we were in lockdown, and yesterday was a glimmer of hope, but not a great day. Still 50 cases, but less than before, so we'll take that. And of course, the weather gods decided to not only rain down, blow. And for some reason, West Auckland seemed to be the place flooding and nowhere else. I don't quite get how that works with water. Shouldn't it just keep spreading out? But maybe there's some drains blocked or something. But yeah, crazy wild weather, and you think, oh God, this is the worst thing. Any tsunami, evacuation, earthquake, that type of thing, in a level 4 lockdown, you think, oh my God. I mean, if this was happening when the numbers were still going from 40 to 80, you'd be thinking, oh dear. But fortunately the numbers were going down and people were being sensible and wearing a mask, and yeah, there was good footage of people doing good practical steps. And I think people now realise that personal safety lockdown, and then above that there's a civil defence lockdown. So, you know, through all of that. And it was quite neat to see yesterday, actually, the ministry released that 6 cases in the current outbreak. So 6 children, less than 1-year-olds. So yeah, and I got a lot of questions like, oh, that's so sad and bad, and how can that be happening? We can't have COVID in children. And having an interest in the COVID children situation, yeah, it was not surprising that they showed a picture of the COVID baby laughing, giggling, playing with the remote of the TV in Jet Park, which didn't actually look that bad, actually. I thought Jet Park, you know, when my time comes, looks pretty good. I was kind of had these visions that this is going to be like prison, but it looked pretty good, actually, I thought. You know, there was food and things like that. And they showed a picture of the baby, you know, being fed, and you know, they had their foot on the table, leaning back, looking pretty happy, obviously surrounded with their parents, which is probably the main thing you need at that age. And yeah, I guess I haven't seen modelling, but just looking at the rates overseas, you probably need about, I guess, 1,000 kids to result in 1 hospitalisation with COVID. So we probably shouldn't be seeing many, if any, symptomatic children in hospital. Obviously, never say never, things can happen. Certainly there are kids with pre-existing issues which might tip the balance. But yeah, it was neat to see, I guess, a non-scary version of COVID on the TV as well, particularly for parents. I think that they can have a think about what it might look like for their child to have COVID. Anywho, I've made it. The phone is still intact despite many little dropsies.